Hey, folks, what do you do when the world feels like it's falling apart? Me, I grab my cat and I just hug him and pet him. My cat and I actually have like moved into a new stage of our relationship where we seem to like each other a lot, which is good. And I'm not going to say it's because I have upgraded his food, but I wouldn't be surprised. That's why I give my cat Smalls. What is Smalls? Well, this show, today's episode is sponsored by Smalls, but smalls.com is real cat food, like real food. It's fresh. They send it to you frozen, and it is real food, stuff that you would find in your fridge. And you can get 60% off your first order plus free shipping by heading to smalls.com and using our promo code majority for a limited time only. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients, like I say, that you would find in your fridge, literally that you would eat. It's delivered right to your door, and that's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. My cat, super, super partial to the chicken flavor, the bird one. But the thing that he really loves is not only the freeze-dried puffball snacks things. My cat now has a thing where he climbs up cabinets, and literally it's his way of saying like I'm ready for my treat. But the difference between pre-smalls and post-smalls is huge. Your cat's gonna get a shinier coat. I'm not sure, but I think the litter box smells a little better. I try not to smell it too much, but nevertheless, like I say, Smalls also has a bunch of amazing treats and snacks that you can order. They also have this broth that you can put on the food to juice it, essentially. My cat, again, loves the bird one. And if you have a picky cat, Smalls has a sampler, so you can try everything that Smalls has to offer. What are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve for a limited time only. Because you are a Majority Report viewer or listener, you get 60% off your first Smalls order plus free shipping by using our code majority. That's 60% off when you head to smalls.com. Use the promo code majority. Again, that's promo code majority for 60% off your first order plus free shipping at smalls.com. Now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, September 15th, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Megan Greenwell, journalist and author of Bad Company, Private Equity and the Death of the American Dream. Also on the program today, Kirk shooter not cooperating, so the Utah governor decides to set a motive narrative. Meanwhile, Trump claims he's made a deal with China over TikTok. You know what that means? It's Taco Monday. Fed meets tomorrow. Trump's still trying to illicitly fire one of its governors. In the wake of shackling 300 Korean workers, Trump desperately begs for more foreign investment. It was a goof. Sorry about that. Don't hold it against me. Governor Hochul endorses Mamdani, leaving Schumer and Jeffries in the lurch. It's 15 days before a government shutdown, and Republicans plan to jam Chuck Schumer and watch him cave. EPA formally proposes eliminating reporting of corporate greenhouse gas emissions. Republican Education Department ends discretionary funding for colleges with large minority student populations. State Department reauthorization bill to include a provision to allow the State Department to revoke passports of U.S. citizens who are public about disagreements with U.S. policy. And farmers coast to coast in despair between tariffs and a lack of labor. One of the farmers called American workers spoiled. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. It is a Monday. Emma is out today. Just a little bit of house cleaning. I'm going to be out for the next couple of days. Family member passed away. My uncle, he was into his 90s, so he lived a long life. Very sweet man. And so I'll be out for a couple of days for that. Emma will be here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Meanwhile, of course, there is just been an incredible amount of misinformation, lack of information coming out about the suspect who killed Charlie Kirk. The reports are that the killer, or a suspected killer, is not cooperating with authorities. And then a whole mess of other stuff that has come out, largely based upon half statements by the Utah governor, and then reporting that is from sources that are around the investigation. You have Kash Patel retweeting reporters reporting that is not directly attributed only to sources around the FBI. Normally what happens is if the FBI wants to put something out, they'll put a statement on it. So when Kash Patel is retweeting reports that supposedly are going on with the FBI, you have to wonder, why is it that he wants to maintain that arm's length and create this narrative? This clip, and I am in no way praising Bill Maher on this, but this clip, I think, captures the dynamic that has gone on over the course of the weekend. This is Ben Shapiro on tour, I guess, in the wake of Charlie Kirk being assassinated.
He's also got a book out.
Oh, he's got a book out too. Here he is on Bill Maher's show.
If there's a shooting at a synagogue, it is very likely to be either a white supremacist or a radical Muslim. If it is a shooting of a Republican politician, it is very likely to be a trans Antifa Marxist shooter.
That is just not true. We don't know what this kid is.
We do know this kid was of the left. We do know that.
We do know what?
That this kid was of the political left. That is according to contemporaneous reporting from The Guardian as well as Tablet Magazine today.
It's 2 days out. We don't know shit, Ben.
But
we don't know shit. They never do. The internet is undefeated in getting it wrong to begin with.
It's not about the internet. That's about the actual reporting by mainstream accepted. The Guardian is not a right-wing.
Here's what we heard. Here's what I was told so far, and I'll tell you what was wrong. First, I heard he's a registered Republican. Not true. Okay, then he was a donor to Trump. Not true. His father works in the sheriff's office. Not true. There was a picture of him wearing a pro-Trump shirt. Not true. Member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Not true. We don't know what he is.
Well,
how are you so sure he's of the left? Now, I agree when you write on a bullet, what did he write on the bullet? Catch
this fascist, which is also a gamer thing.
Okay, but now I'm hearing he may have been part of that group for whom Charlie Kirk was not right-wing enough.
You mean the Groypers? Yes. I mean, so that would.
So you're sure he's not that?
I'm not sure that he's not that.
A minute ago you were sure what he was.
Hold on, Bill. Hold on. Okay, because I've been.
You were.
I mean, yeah. We don't know about this guy. And even the information that we're getting, put aside the reporting, because the reporting has to be coming from somewhere. And there has been no one who has said, in any of the reporting that I've seen, where there's a quote from anybody who said he's of the left. This is what we get from the guy. First of all, I can't even how incredibly, the idea of hypocrisy is, who cares? But this guy, what's his name? Spencer Cox, who's out there talking like we must come together. And then, dog whistles, there's no rioting, there's no, basically just presenting the right-wing talking points and how we need to come together and calm things down. And then he goes on this tour this weekend and giving half information. I mean, aside from the fact that God knows what he's going to do to any attempts to convict this guy, but all of this sort of it's half conjecture. Yeah, I mean, watch this with the notion that what Spencer Cox is out there going is we know 2 plus maybe 2 equals, I'm not going to say what it equals. People are going to have to decide for themselves. That's what he's doing here. And it's that second 2 in that equation that is vague enough. And then again, you got Kash Patel out there retweeting reporting that supposedly is attributing things to the FBI, but he has the ability to put out a statement from the FBI. Good.
Understood. I just want to go back to my first question about what you told the Wall Street Journal about that this is a person indoctrinated with leftist ideology. And the reason why I think it would be great to be more specific is because your goal of trying to lower the temperature, you said that this is based on investigation and interviews with people who knew him. Did they just use the term leftist ideology or did they give specifics?
Yeah, there are conversations that were discussed specifically about Charlie Kirk. Other conversations about the direction that this was going.
Listen, he is not addressing the question here. He is not addressing the question. And the bottom line is, if you're going to put out statements that this guy has leftist ideology, you should be able to, which you shouldn't be doing at this point until you have really it all sewn up. You should be able to answer her question with, yes, we have had specifics where people we have interviewed who are very close to him have said, quote, he had a leftist ideology. But instead, he's dancing around to all this stuff. The level of irresponsibility of this guy is off the charts. Go back a little bit and just let people listen to the way he responds to this question. It is insane.
Sure. You said that this is based on investigation and interviews with people who knew him. Did they just use the term leftist ideology or did they give specifics?
Yeah, there are conversations that were discussed specifically about Charlie Kirk. Other conversations about the direction that this was going. And look, my job is just to tell people I really don't have a dog in this fight. If this was MAGA and a radicalized MAGA person, I would be saying that as well. If the Friends were saying that, I would be sharing that as well. That's not what they're sharing. And so I do think it is important, again, to understand how someone gets radicalized like this. And in this case, it happened as much as people wish it wasn't or don't want it to be this. These are the facts that are being presented to us. If there are additional facts that would point otherwise, but family discussions, parents, this is what they're saying, and these things happen. And so it's okay to have these discussions.
Listen, absolutely, and I'm just trying to get more facts, more details of the facts that you're putting out.
Pause it.
One last question on that. You just
No, she's not trying to get more facts. She's trying to get a fact. Conversations about discussions does not in any way even come remotely close to answering what she's saying. So if this guy's able to go out and say he had a left-wing ideology, why can't he state a single fact?
Someone will testify
That
to that.
would be a piece of evidence of that. Not a shred of it. This is just, and the idea that we don't have major mass media editorials or whatnot saying that this guy is acting about as recklessly as you possibly could at this point. In this veneer of trying to be like, I would say it if it was my, you're not saying anything except for you're making some broad assessment, and you can't even say what one single building block about that is. If it is the case, and we don't know if it is the case, that this guy was in a romantic relationship with another man, or was in a romantic relationship with a transgender woman, if that's the case, that still doesn't mean that this person had left wing. I can tell you right now that there are groypers who are either out and gay or secretly gay. I know this. That is the case. So the idea that, and we don't even know about whether any of that is true. There's a picture of a roommate wearing a onesie.
And some hearsay relayed by law enforcement.
And this guy goes on and makes assessments in the press. And then when he's questioned as to like, what is one element that is the basis of that assessment? And nothing. Plato.
And so it's okay to have these discussions.
Listen, absolutely. And I'm just trying to get more facts, more details of the facts that you're putting out there. One last question on that. You just said right now, which is something that you mentioned on Friday, is that he had discussions with family members about Charlie Kirk. Do you have specifics on what he was saying about Charlie Kirk to his family?
Just not a fan. That's all I can say.
Okay, not a specific reason why.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, I don't know why he's laughing, but he's not a fan of Charlie Kirk. You know what? I would have guessed that based upon the bullet that he put into Charlie Kirk. The question isn't whether he was a fan of Charlie Kirk. You're out there saying that he has some leftist ideology. In what way wasn't he a fan of Charlie Kirk? Because you can go back to 2017. Back at the time when Charlie Kirk was okay being on stage with a gay man and in front of TPUSA, and watch the groypers go up and add a mic and go after Charlie Kirk because of this. And they are not fans of Charlie Kirk. You don't have to go back more than a couple of weeks to see Nick Fuentes making it clear that he was not a fan of Charlie Kirk.
You shouldn't let him call himself a Christian.
I am also was not a fan of Charlie Kirk's, but I'm not going to commit any type of violent acts. That doesn't tell us anything about the shooter. I don't think there was anybody in the country who thought maybe this was just a really intense fan of Charlie Kirk's. So the governor's going out there making assessments, and when he's questioned on even providing one iota of substance to support those assessments, all he does is say the most obvious thing in the world, that the killer of Charlie Kirk was not a fan of Charlie Kirk's, and just leaves it out there to imply that he was not a fan of Charlie Kirk's because he was a leftist. I don't have any different expectations of people on the right, but the idea that the normie media doesn't seem to be able to point out, like, hey, this is nuts what he's doing here. Nuts. All right, in a minute, we're going to be talking to Megan Greenwell, journalist and author of Bad Company, Private Equity, and the Death of the American Dream. We got a couple of sponsors of the program today. Things are off the hook. I don't know what to tell you. Where are we here? Okay. Oh. If you are like me, dealing with hair issues like thinning or shedding, and for me, it was like, I usually use dark towels, but like a year or so ago, I was using I got a white towel, and I realized, like, I have a problem. I am shedding too much hair. And, you know, you get to be my age, it's like, I can't afford to do that. If you are stuck on what to try, I get it. There's a lot of products out there. A lot of products that are drugs, essentially, that you may be a little bit nervous of taking. That's why I gave Nutrafol a closer look. It's not just hype. It is physician formulated, clinically tested, and even recommended by dermatologists. I've been using it now for, I don't know, over a year, and it has been, it has made a big difference. And believe me, I check every time now. With the, I did it this morning with my during the conditioner phase. That's where you can really tell. And I'm shedding less. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand. It is trusted by over 1.5 million people. And you can feel good about what you're putting into your body. Nutrafol hair growth supplements are backed by peer-reviewed studies and NSF content certified, which is the gold standard in third-party certification for supplements. Many supplements rely on ingredient studies. Well, Nutrafol clinically tests its final formulations to ensure their efficacy. They use like hair measurement tools like hair counts and pull tests, and it assesses growth and quality, texture, etc. Adding Nutrafol to your daily routine is simple. They send it to you on a monthly basis. You can see thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol offering you $10 off your first month subscription, free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com. Enter the promo code TMR10. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com. promo code TMR10. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR10. Also, sponsoring the program today, Factor Meals. Fall is always terrifying for me because my kid's back in school. Our schedule is set. I got to make some meals. I don't have time to make meals. And this is where Factor comes in. They are a HelloFresh company. HelloFresh is where you piece together the meals. Well, Factor is those meals, but they're already prepared. They are chef prepared. They are dietitian approved. And so if you have specific eating goals, very easy. For me, the eating goal is I want my son to eat it. And I want it to be wholesome, but I want him to eat it. I have watched my son now eat a roasted garlic chicken. He likes potatoes now. There's no explaining what kids like or not. A shredded chicken taco bowl. We've had pasta dishes, like a tortellini, like with 4 different cheeses. You got to check it out. Go to factormeals.com/majority50 off. All one word, majority50 off, and use code majority50 off, 50 off, to get 50% off your first box, plus free breakfast for 1 year. More variety, more meals. You can choose from a wider selection of weekly meal options. They got premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. Support your wellness goals. Enjoy even more GLP-1 friendly meals and new Mediterranean diet options packed with protein and good for you fats. Savor global flavors. For the first time, try Asian inspired meals with bold flavors influenced by China, Thailand, and more. For more choices for better nutrition, that's why 97% of customers say that Factor helped them live a healthier life. Feel the difference no matter your routine. Super easy. You get them at the beginning of the week. You put them in your fridge. It takes 2 minutes in the microwave. I never understood why people had microwaves. I really didn't. I didn't get one until a year ago. I didn't understand it. Eat smart at factormeals.com/majority50 off, majority50 off, and use the code majority50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code majority50 off at factorsmeals.com. 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for a year. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Check it out. We will put the link in the podcast and YouTube description. In a moment, we'll be back. Megan Greenwell, journalist, author of Bad Company, Private Equity, and the Death of the American Dream. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Megan Greenwell. I should say Emma Vigeland out today. I want to welcome to the program Megan Greenwell, journalist and author of Bad Company, Private Equity, and the Death of the American Dream. Megan, welcome to the program. I got to tell you, I've been waiting to start to see books about private equity because it is such I think, a nefarious force in not just our economy, but it is degrading so much, it seems to me, in our society. Let's just start with your experience that motivated you at Deadspin to write the book.
I was the editor-in-chief of Deadspin, which was a small kind of leftist, kind of snarky sports site. And that was really my dream job. That was where I wanted to work. Once I got that job, I was sort of great, this is where I'm staying. And it all went wrong within about a year and a half. We were bought by a private equity firm based in Boston called Great Hill Partners. And really day one, I knew this was going to be a disaster. They came in asking the dumbest possible questions, but not even asking dumb questions with a spirit of curiosity, asking dumb questions clearly intending to use the answer to justify their own bad decisions. And Deadspin was profitable. Deadspin had a huge, very loyal audience, 20 million unique visitors a month with a staff of 20. We were doing really, really well. And so I sort of naively thought, we'll be fine because we're doing well. That was not the case. I was driven out of my job within about 3 months. The rest of my colleagues followed me out the door about 2 months after that. And it really got me interested in why private equity works the way it does and how it plays out in other industries, where the stakes are a little more life or death than in snarky sports blogs.
We should say that, well, there's a couple of things. I mean, one, this is really a story about extraction. And in many respects, it really reflects what we're seeing going on in the government writ large, frankly, where an enterprise is essentially sucked of its life force because there's so much here. I just got to say, though, you had mentioned at one point that Deadspin still is around, but it is now a husk of itself. And it was bought more or less for the URL value for a sort of like gaming site funnel. And you had mentioned that greenfieldpuppies.com gets more views. And now I've been stuck on that Greenfield Puppies thing for way too long, just looking at the puppies.
That was really my favorite detail. Yeah.
I mean, it was a nice thing to do too, because it's a rescue and but putting that aside for a moment. The private equity thing really fascinates me because I had a conversation with a vet like a year or two ago. And I had heard about this happening. I knew somebody who was a dermatologist. And the stories I heard about the vet, and I ask you this about Deadspin, just, so that we can launch into this. But the story I heard from the vet was like, it's a small private practice. This vet set it up 20 or 30 years ago. And the private equity people come in, they have some requirements to keep people in place so that it can remain competitive for a certain period of time, but they pressure the workers on some level, or to stick around and agree to stick around so that this guy can sell his practice and finally get the payoff. And it is incredibly manipulative. And then they're just going in to cut anyways. And that vets now are like one of the number one professions for suicide because they have the private equity people have them raise the rates of services that would save the lives of pets. And people can't afford it. And so they end up putting their animals down, and the vets go in there and know that they have to tell people, we've got to put that it's just an incredibly depressing experience. Now, you follow 4 people through their own various things in 4 different areas, media, retail, housing, and hospitals. Tell us about the 4 that you chose and why those 4 areas.
Yeah, so I chose the areas because they felt representative of the overall private equity trend in one way or another. So the book opens with retail, which is now sort of an outdated industry for private equity. They're not much interested in retail anymore. There are exceptions. Walgreens just got bought by private equity. But for the most part, they're trying to get out because retail isn't sexy anymore. But what you see is they were involved in retail earlier on, and then they got into hospitals, and they applied the exact same playbook from retail into hospitals. So it really didn't matter whether it was selling toys or delivering babies or saving people after a heart attack. All of that is just like a widget that can be, increase or decrease the production of to make more money. The ultimate goal for a private equity firm is solely to make money for itself. That does not require, in a lot of cases, making money for the portfolio company. It only requires making money for the partners. And so in some cases, you end up in a situation where the most valuable move for the private equity partners is actually to work against the interests of your own portfolio company. And so telling that story over these 4 industries felt really valuable. In terms of the characters, I worked so hard to pick the right characters. I talked to over 300 people for the book, and at least 150 of them were potential protagonists. I knew I needed characters that readers would sort of fall in love with. And not that they're perfect people, but they're all incredibly compelling people, and people who would just talk and talk and talk and never decline to answer a question, which is not most people. And so I got lucky enough with a lot of hard work, I mean, literally over a year, to find 4 people who are so dedicated to what they did and, you know, so riled up about what happened to them that they were just, you know, I spent days and weeks with each of these people in their home asking them incredibly invasive questions. Most people don't want to deal with that. I know I would not. But I happened to find 4 incredible people, Liz, Roger, Natalia, and Loren, who, you know, really wanted their stories to be out there.
I want to get to those 4 people, but let's take a step back and talk about what private equity is, and particularly like distinguish it, because this notion of you can make money by buying a company or buying an enterprise, and your ability to make money is not just untethered from the health of that enterprise, but in fact may be in direct inverse proportion or relationship to the health of that company. So first, distinguish for us private equity from like venture capitalists. Those 2 things I think get confused, and they're different because they have different essentially interests or agendas.
Yes, I get tagged in stories online all the time of a venture capital disaster, and I'm like, okay, so different. So, I mean, the most obvious difference is that venture capital is taking a stake in a company. Private equity is generally acquiring companies wholesale. So that means whereas a venture capitalist might get a board seat, the private equity firm has full control over every company decision. And so that's like a really serious, important difference. And the way venture capital is set up, venture capital is out looking for unicorns, right? The only way for them to succeed is for enough of their companies to be really successful. They can stomach all sorts of disasters as well because they're playing a hits game. But what they're
it's like a roulette. They're playing roulette, and they're hoping that one of those 10 bets comes in and lands.
Correct.
And it's going to pay for the rest of the bets, and it's going to pay and more.
Yes, but that bet landing requires that company being successful. In private equity, I'll take Toys R Us as an example because it's the first story in my book. The private equity firms in charge of Toys R Us took out $5 billion in loans to buy Toys R Us, and they were not legally responsible for paying those loans back. Only Toys R Us itself was. So the result was when, after several years of private equity ownership, Toys R Us went under, none of the employees got severance. They were promised severance in their contracts, but they weren't given severance because they were too low down on the creditors list during the bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And KKR and Bain Capital, the 2 private equity firms in charge, both walked away from the life of that deal making a profit. So,
okay, I want to walk people through this because this is a leverage buyout, and this concept, I explain this leverage because Joanne Fabrics just went under in a very similar situation. And I had to explain to my kids who, various crafters, I had to explain what went on, and they just looked at me like, what?
Yeah.
Because they're like, literally, my 12-year-old son said, how is that legal?
Yeah.
And they take out a loan to buy the company, and then they make the company responsible for the loan. Then they extract all the value out of the company, whether that's real estate assets or, the machinery or whatever. I mean, they don't always do this but this is broadly the formula.
Yeah.
They screw the company, they take their fees, they take their profits from whatever they're working on and whatnot. Meanwhile, the company is struggling to pay back this debt. Then it can't. Then it goes into bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Then they owe, the pension for the workers. They owe these creditors. The private equity guys are like, well, that's the corporation. It's not us.
Yes.
And they walk away with all the money. And
No,
they've
that's
basically
exactly
extracted
right.
it. It's insane. It's
That's
insane.
exactly right. So in the case of Toys R Us, it wasn't only that Toys R Us was buried under $5 billion of debt. The private equity firms in charge also sold off all of their real estate, as you mentioned. So Toys R Us historically had owned almost all of its own real estate, at least in the US. So now all of a sudden, they're paying rent on the exact same land they until recently owned outright. The proceeds from those real estate transactions are obviously going to line the pocket of the private equity firms. And so it's just not that hard for a private equity firm to make money off of a company it owns while driving the company into the ground.
That's what they saw, right? They saw that real estate assets and they said, like, this is a one-time payout.
Yes.
We can grab that. We can put that in our pockets. And the bankruptcy won't happen until we are basically safely have put that cash in our pockets.
Well, and it's not even just a one-time payout, because in a lot of cases, they strike sweetheart deals with the people they've sold the real estate to, such that they're taking a cut of the rent payments. So they're really
they sell the land to themselves in for under market rate or whatever, a sweetheart deal. They pocket the proceeds of that with one hand. With the other hand, they take rent from their company.
Yeah, or even if they're not selling the real estate to themselves, they may be selling it to someone with whom they have a very you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of relationship. So in hospitals, for example, there's a company called Medical Properties Trust that's based in Alabama that I'm just fascinated by. They are not themselves a private equity firm, but they are the favored real estate partner of every private equity firm in hospitals. So of course, all of these big firms have cozy relationships with Medical Properties Trust, where they get bonuses for orchestrating the deal to MPT instead of to some other real estate investment trust. And so they get the proceeds from selling the land, but they also get, little transaction bonuses because Medical Property Trust is their pal.
It's just this dynamic, and people have to understand they're doing this with like almost every vet you go to now. And now that we should say that's one model of the extraction, which is the full, we're just going to suck the entire lifeblood out of this. There's other models, and let's go through this. You mentioned Liz from Toys R Us, and the employees lost their pension. And she was someone who was so dedicated to Toys R Us that she had a tattoo of the logo. I mean, let's go to Roger Goes, who worked at the Wyoming Doctors Hospital. Or Wyoming?
Riverton Memorial Hospital.
Riverton Memorial in Wyoming. What is how do they apply? Because obviously, well, in some instances they might shut down a hospital or two, but in this one, it's a similar dynamic, but a slightly different sort of like, we're not going to fully extract all of the life force out of this. We're just going to make it much leaner.
Yes, exactly. So in private equity hospitals right now, what's going on is essentially a great roll-up. A private equity firm will buy dozens and dozens of hospitals and consolidate as much of their operations as possible. So when Apollo Global Management bought the hospital where Roger worked in Riverton, Wyoming, very small town Wyoming, they decided to consolidate it with another hospital they owned about 30 miles away. And originally everybody thought, okay, like consolidating means centralizing billing and IT, stuff that leaves more money for patient care. But what ended up happening was Riverton's hospital lost its ability to deliver babies. All of a sudden it had no OBGYN ward at all. And so you had to travel 30 miles through windswept canyon to the other private equity hospital in the town of Lander to even be able to deliver a baby. Even Lander only had 1 or 2 people capable of delivering babies on staff. So if they were busy or if you had any sort of complication, you were getting on a medevac flight to a bigger town. So the result was the number of medevac flights out of Fremont County, where both Riverton and Lander are, increased 900% after this private equity acquisition. It wasn't that the hospital didn't exist anymore. It was just that you couldn't get care in a real way there anymore.
Who paid for the medevac?
Well, interesting you should ask. Medevac companies are also a very popular target for private equity. And so
Of course, this is like I'm going to rent from myself. I mean, this is.
Yeah, exactly.
We're creating a new business for ourselves.
Right, exactly. So you see, you can't get service at your private equity owned hospital. The private equity has bought the medevac company and obviously increased the prices dramatically. And so now you get a bill for, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. This is also one of the poorest areas of Wyoming. And you can't afford to pay that bill. And the only reason you are being charged that bill in the first place is because they took all the services from your local hospital.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing. And okay,
Yes.
let's go to media. I mean, your story at Deadspin was similar to this, same type of formula. Let's degrade or just sell or completely extract and sell off.
Mm-hmm. So I was particularly interested in looking at local media because there are all these academic studies showing the importance of local media to communities, and not just in the sort of romantic, sure, everybody needs a local newspaper kind of way, but in real tangible ways. There are studies that show the rate of government corruption goes up when a community doesn't have a local newspaper. Their bond ratings go down, which means eventually people end up paying higher taxes because they do not have a local newspaper. And so I was really interested in how has this played out in so many communities that have been stripped of their newspaper, and what does it mean for the journalists who go in, wanting to tell important stories about a place. One of the things that was really interesting to me is there's been a lot of coverage of Alden Global Capital, which is the most easily caricatured private equity firm hedge fund in media. And they're truly evil. But I think that the focus on Alden has actually allowed Gannett to go off the hook. Gannett is much, much bigger than Alden. Gannett is historically, this very renowned newspaper company that was the only source of news in many communities. And though Gannett is not currently actually private equity owned, it was a couple of years ago, its biggest debt holders are still 2 private equity firms. So they still have private equity calling the shots. And I think the story of Gannett has really been overlooked. And that was why I wanted to write about it and write about this character, Natalia, who spent her whole career at Gannett newspapers because she felt passionately about telling important local stories. She's just a firecracker. She's so fun to talk to. And I've heard from a lot of readers that they really connected with Natalia.
How do they go about, how does private equity in these situations make money in the context of media enterprises? Because how that formula that they have, which again can either mean we sink the company or we just we just figure out how to sort of extract on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
How do they do it in the context of media?
So the staff size just gets decimated to the point that now there is an entire class of what scholars call ghost newspapers, which are newspapers that still come out and people still pay subscriptions for them, but they do not have a single journalist on staff. It is all syndicated content, and people keep subscribing, basically out of loyalty. That will end at some point. People will catch on, and younger people are far less likely to subscribe to any newspaper than older folks are. So that's not a long-term strategy, but private equity is a short-term game, right? So you can cut all the staff. Even in bigger cities, the Austin American-Statesman, for example, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, had a couple hundred journalists on staff, and now it's in the 20s, I believe. So, a state the size of Texas, with a state capital as important as Austin, with politics as important as what's going on in Texas, and all of a sudden you have, a tenth of the journalists covering it, maybe less. Another one of the strategies, like we talked about in hospitals and retail, is you can sell off their big, grand, historic headquarters downtown and move them out to the suburbs, or charge them rent for part of the same building they once owned. So, for example, the Chicago Tribune had this iconic tower in downtown Chicago that is now luxury condos because Alden Global Capital sold that headquarters to a developer, and that's what they did with it. And the Tribune journalists work, way, way out there. So there are all sorts of like little tricks that you can take from one industry and just apply it, copy and paste it to another.
I like whenever I talk about this stuff, I have this like vision of like, I can't remember which one of the sci-fi things where it's just like, we're keeping the host alive, feeding it gruel so we can just use the energy coming out of it. And it's really, it's incredible. Talk about how it implicates housing.
So the housing stuff is really rough. Private equity is involved in pretty much every sector of the housing market right now. So they started in mobile homes, grew out to single family, build houses that they would buy and then rent out to other people. And now they're in massive apartment buildings as well. So I looked at one such absolutely huge apartment complex in Northern Virginia outside DC, 2,300 units. And the private equity firm came in and essentially started acting like slumlords, right? That people couldn't get basic fixes done. Rents were going up. At one point, there was this catastrophic flood that kicked 14 families out of their apartments. They were still being charged rent originally for this. And the landlord told them, like, if some of your stuff was ruined, just call your rental insurance company. This is a apartment complex that serves a pretty low income population. Not everybody has rental insurance. And my character, Loren, another real firecracker who doesn't put up with anything from anybody, stood up at this meeting in front of her landlord and all of her neighbors and said, "We're not going to pay our renter's insurance. That's crazy. This is your fault, and you will be paying for all of our expenses," which they eventually did. But also Loren got evicted for being such a troublemaker, essentially. And, she could have fought it in court, but Virginia does not have very friendly laws to tenants. And she just decided, I can't live here anymore anyway.
So in that scenario, are they coming in, are they larding up the apartment building with debt in that scenario? Or is it just that we think that there's 20% of our services as a landlord that we can cut? Maybe there'll be, 2% will be clawed back by legal cases, whatnot, but we can squeeze 18% out of just making the experience. I mean, they're not, I don't think they care, but we can cut 20%, I'm just picking a number, of like the operating costs, which are borne by the tenants in this instance, right? Like, I don't have hot water for a week or two, or I don't have heat for, 3 weeks out of the year, or the elevator's broken for a couple of days, or whatever it is. The tenants bear it, it's not painted, whatever it is, the tenants bear the cost in their experience, maybe out of their pocket, like in terms of the flooding. And the private equity people, like, that's just the cost of doing business. Maybe a little bit of legal fees, and that's it. We can extract 20% out of this thing as it exists today.
Yeah, so there is some bank debt. There is a lot of cutting costs and increasing rent. But one of the biggest tricks they have in the housing industry that actually is specific to housing is private equity firms can access money from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are government institutions. I mean, they are private companies, but they're overseen by the government. And the reason those companies were founded was to give low interest loans to ordinary Americans hoping to buy their first homes. There is nothing stopping private equity from getting that money as well. And that money has a very, very low interest rate. So unlike investors in a private equity firm where you actually have to pay them a share of your profits, here you just have to pay whatever the low interest rate is, and then you're off scot-free. And so Fannie and Freddie money has been absolutely crucial to private equity firms profiting off of housing. And at various times, progressive lawmakers have said, look, this isn't what Fannie and Freddie were designed to do. We got to shut this down. But there's not a lot of appetite on Capitol Hill to regulate either private equity or its sources of capital, because 88% of members of the House and Senate are taking money from private equity. So there's just no appetite for change.
I mean, the stories of these people and the way that they fight back against this is, I think, people will really enjoy these narratives, and I think it's great. But I'm also curious as to, like, do we have any regulation, like on a broad scale? Is there even a class of legislation that in any way regulates private equity? I mean, they sort of like sneak in and get loans, low interest rates that were really not meant to be a profit center. They destroy companies because we are inculcated to believe that in the context of capitalism, capitalists build companies that help communities. I mean, this is all sort of like a fairy tale, and I think everybody knows that. But it is so hard for people to wrap around, and there are other instances of this, where the money that comes in, the people that buy a company or an enterprise, their success is untethered from the success of that thing. It's so hard for people to understand that concept because it really, like, it's shocking. Are there any regulations, like, broadly speaking, on this practice?
So there's truthfully just very, very little. Private equity firms even have to disclose much less about their operations as other kinds of companies do. And on the federal level, I don't see that changing anytime soon because, like I say, 88% of the House and Senate are on the dole of private equity. That said, there is some interesting stuff happening on the state level in multiple places. So both Massachusetts and Oregon recently passed pretty significant laws increasing scrutiny of private equity deals in healthcare, and in Oregon's case, strengthening its ban against what's called the corporate practice of medicine, meaning that at least potentially private equity firms can't own hospitals or doctors' clinics at all. And so I think it is really easy to get discouraged by the lack of regulation on the federal level and the lack of movement toward any regulation on the federal level. Elizabeth Warren has proposed what she calls the Stop Wall Street Looting Act over and over and over again. And that would fundamentally transform how private equity operates, but it never gets anywhere close to getting out of committee. And so, you can be depressed by that. Or maybe, and you can also look at what can be done on the state level, on the local level, at the level of lobbying in front of pension fund boards, because pension funds have a tremendous amount of power with private equity firms because they're among the biggest investors. And these are all places where ordinary people have a little bit more of a voice than they would in federal politics most of the time. So there is some interesting movement happening. And I think, one thing that really unites people across the political spectrum is being upset about income inequality and being upset at billionaires. So that is actually sort of heartening to me. The fact that once people see what is going on with private equity, they start to think they should do something about it, or somebody should do something about it, regardless of their political affiliation. And I think you're seeing some interesting examples of that happening in a few places.
Lastly, is there a clearinghouse to get a sense? I mean, I know you, I think in your book, it was 8% of the economy is a function of private equity. Are there clearinghouses like that show where, what private equity, what industries have been completely sort of swallowed up by private equity? Because I'm just fascinated by this, because it is literally like undermined. I mean, aside from and you have great stories of individuals who have been, were directly impacted by this, as people who are working for these enterprises. But our daily lives is just a little crappier because of this, and we don't know why.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, one experience I had over and over when talking to workers is them saying they didn't even know their company was owned by private equity until everything went wrong, right? Because if you work at Toys R Us, your bosses 7 layers above you work at Toys R Us, your paychecks say Toys R Us. Unless you're a very nosy reporter like I am, why would you know, right? So there is no one central clearinghouse. My favorite resource is called the Private Equity Stakeholder Project, and they're a nonprofit who basically monitors what's going on with private equity. They're not able to capture absolutely everything, but in their areas of focus, which do include both housing and medicine, they're really, really good at figuring things out and making that information available to the rest of us. So they have a hospital tracker, for example, on their website, where you can go to their website and look up any hospital in the country and see if it's private equity owned. And I think people should do that. I think people should have the information.
There's a hospital. I can't remember what it's called now, because it's just a story from that I know from a friend that is known by all the other hospitals. That's where people go to die. And it is a private equity hospital. Folks get in there, and if you're sent there, in an emergency, then it's just so poorly run. I can't remember what the name of it is.
Tell your friend to get in touch with me.
I will do that.
Great.
I will, in fact, do that.
Always out for scoops,
Megan Greenwell, journalist and author of Bad Company, Private Equity, and the Death of the American Dream. So important for people to read about these stories, because it is, I am convinced, not only is it, do we have direct impact on our daily lives, it is also shows you a dynamic that I think is even taking place in corporations that aren't involved with private equity, but the same dynamic with stock buybacks and whatnot, the notion that people can make money, even when their company, that we have two sets of interests that diverge often, the health of the company long-term and the people who control it getting wealthier. It's important for people to be able to understand how those concepts exist at the same time. Megan Greenwell, we will link to your book at majority.fm in the podcast and YouTube description. And I will connect you with that person.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. All right, folks. what's the website to search hospitals re private equity? It is the Private Equity Stakeholder Project. We'll put a link to that. And we're going to talk to a guest from there eventually. Midwest Brewer, we have hospitals in Michigan that are known as the place you go to die, Corewell Health.
I've heard that around here too. Places like in the Bronx, for instance, people growing up there realizing like a very different relationship to hospitals than the one that I have.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half. Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can keep us surviving and thriving by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get the free half, free of commercials. You get the fun half. But most importantly, you keep this show being able to provide interviews that other people would say it's not sexy. But and maybe a little bit dry, but this is the home of the not so sexy, sometimes dry, daily news program.
On things that control your life.
Yes. That are impacting you on a daily basis. This vet stuff, a year ago, it was a year ago in August, my cat with diabetes, we had to put down. And I felt so bad. We went, it was an emergency. We went to the cat hospital. And I felt so bad for the young vet associate who, had to come to us and say like, well, it's going to cost like literally like the price of a car. And then we can figure out what's wrong with him. But for the next like 5 days, whatever. And then this guy had to, witness his family, and my young kid holding the cat as we put it to sleep. Like, and this guy's knowing that like whatever care they were going to provide at a place not owned by private equity, because I had this conversation with a vet just by chance, and she had left this place that had been bought by private equity because she's like and vets were like want to get the highest suicide rates because they're sitting there knowing, you become a vet because you love animals, and when it's so explicit that this pet is going to live or die because of the expense, and because there's somebody, we need a higher profit margin here. And if it means we put down some animals, then we also get an extra 10% on that. I mean, it's like that dynamic with, we close the hospitals and then we buy into the medevac company. We make it on both ends. All right. Also, justcoffee.coop. It's a co-op. It's a co-op. It's owned by the employees. And they make great coffee. Price is still reasonable, even though we have tariffs. They take care of their farmers, whether it's in Chiapas or in Africa, various places in Africa. I think they have growers. And they take care of their employees because they're part owners. JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee. You can get the Majority Report blend, or just get 10% off by using the coupon code Majority. Matt, Left Reckoning.
Yeah, Left Reckoning. For the Sunday show, we talked about the topic of the week last week, and also a Texas State professor, Tom Alter, who got canceled for basically being to the left of LBJ at a socialist Zoom conference, and that being infiltrated by Karlin Borsenko, who was a Jan 6er sort of lunatic, and she publicized some videos of him criticizing of the Democratic Party as a member of a socialist party, not DSA, a different one. But yeah, he's fired now. He had tenure, now he's fired. So we'll check that out. Patreon.com/leftreckoning.
A lot of people getting canceled for not espousing the regime's line on what Charlie Kirk provided society. Interesting. We literally go to free speech to canceling people for even repeating his quotes.
I saw some idiot centrist say that you guys are missing the point when you say the right is doing it now too because the left started it, as if the left started this.
It is insane. It is insane. I mean, even if you were completely dead set on knowing no history, you must have heard of the Red Scare in this country, right? Like, you must have heard that people were getting explicitly canceled for any type of association or at all with anything left of the straightforward, capitalism that we practice in this country.
The Iraq War era, like, do people not even remember that far back? Like Dixie Chicks?
And understand, and I've said this many times before, to the extent that we didn't have cancel culture before, it was because people would not get scheduled with the type of beliefs to the left. You would not get the interview. You would not get the job. You would not get scheduled, as it were. There was no need to cancel you because you would never get hired in the first place. Just absurd.
Judd Leggum. Charlie Kirk was a champion of free speech, and anyone who says otherwise will be fired.
There you go. All right, quick break. Fun half.